Have you ever really stopped to wonder how we did it? How we went from being just another animal on the savannah to, well, running the entire planet? The secret isn't our claws or our muscles. It's not even just our big brains. It's something much, much weirder. Our ability to get millions of complete strangers to cooperate. So let's dive into this using Yuval Noah Harari's incredible book Sapiens as our guide to see how stories, quite literally, built our world.
See, for about the last 70,000 years, we've been living in a kind of dual reality. On one side, you've got objective reality, rivers, trees, lions, stuff you can actually touch, see, or be eaten by. But then there's this other layer, an imagined reality, filled with things like gods, nations, and money. These things don't physically exist anywhere. They only exist inside our collective minds.
So here's the big question. Which one really has more power in the 21st century? Is it the tangible lion in the wild, or is it the totally abstract idea of the US dollar? The answer to that question, well, it explains pretty much everything about modern human civilization.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the human superpower that makes all this possible. Then, we'll jump into the huge revolutions that shaped us. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of this imagined world. And finally, we'll look ahead to the absolutely wild future that we are now starting to design for ourselves. Okay, first up, our cooperation engine. Sure, lots of animals cooperate. Ants, bees, wolves, but they do it in really rigid ways, and usually only with close relatives. We sapiens, we can cooperate flexibly, with millions of total strangers. And the reason we can do that is because of a massive upgrade to our mental software. If you look at the timeline, for most of our history, we were really nothing special. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been around for about 200,000 years. But for most of that time, we were just minding our own business in a corner of Africa. But then, around 70,000 years ago, something explosive happened. Harari calls it the cognitive revolution. And this is the moment that history really broke away from biology.
Before this revolution, we had a hard limit on our group size, and that number was about 150. Why? Well, it turns out that's roughly the maximum number of people you can truly know, trust, and keep track of through good old-fashioned gossip. If a group got any bigger than that, it would just fall apart.
So how did we smash through that 150-person barrier? We developed a brand new tool, fictive language. This isn't just lying, it's the ability to talk about, and more importantly, to collectively believe in things that aren't real. A chimp can warn another chimp about a lion, but only a human can tell you a story about the great lion spirit of the tribe.
And this new ability had two absolutely game-changing consequences. First, if we all believe in the same story, the same God, the same nation, the same company mission, we can trust each other and work together, even if we've never met. And second, stories can change way, way faster than our DNA can. This allowed us to totally reinvent our societies over and over again, leaving slow-paced genetic evolution in the dust.
Okay, so here's a little experiment for you. This week, find a shared goal, maybe a project at work or something in your community, and try explaining it to someone new. But don't just list the facts and figures. Try to tell them the story behind it, the why that gets everyone on board. You'll be using this ancient superpower in real time.
All right, let's move on. Our new storytelling and cooperation skills didn't just sit there. They powered massive revolutions that totally reshaped the planet. But here's the tricky part. Were these revolutions the straightforward march of progress we think they were? Or were they, in some ways, a kind of trap?
Let's start with the big one, the agricultural revolution, about 12,000 years ago. The story we all learn in school is that this was a huge leap forward, but Harari comes in with a pretty provocative claim. He calls it history's biggest fraud.
You'd think life got better, right? Well, for the average person, the evidence says not so much. Foragers had a really diverse diet and actually worked fewer hours. Early farmers, on the other hand, depended on just a few crops like wheat or rice, which meant more disease, more famine, and way more backbreaking labor. We thought we were domesticating wheat, but when you look at it, it kind of feels like wheat domesticated us.
Now, fast forward a few thousand years. About 500 years ago, a totally new kind of revolution kicked off, the scientific revolution. And unlike the old systems based on ancient texts that claimed to have all the answers, modern science was founded on one powerful, incredibly humble idea, admitting that we don't know. The starting point was simply saying, we are ignorant. And that one simple admission created this incredible feedback loop that changed everything.
Scientific research created new power. Better technology, stronger weapons, new medicines. That power made political and economic forces like empires and capitalists very interested. They poured money and resources into more research, which created even more power, which attracted more money, and you can see how this cycle just exploded.
So all this brings us right to our modern world, a world that is built from the ground up on these powerful shared stories. This is the very architecture of our reality.
Over the centuries, 3 of these stories proved to be especially good at getting huge, diverse groups of people on the same page. These are the 3 great unifiers of humankind: money, empires, and universal religions. Each one, in its own way, sold a vision of the world where everyone could play by the same set of rules.
Of all of these, money is probably the most successful story ever told. It's genius, really, because you don't actually have to believe in the value of a piece of paper. You only have to believe that everyone else believes in it. It's the ultimate trust network. It lets 2 people who worship different gods and want to kill each other cooperate perfectly on a business deal.
What all these systems are really are imagined orders. Now, that doesn't mean they're just fantasies. They aren't an objective reality like gravity, but they're not just a personal dream either. They're intersubjective, meaning they exist in the shared communication of millions of people. And as long as we all keep believing in them, they have enormous real-world power. This is a perfect example. The idea that all men are created equal and have inalienable rights. That's not a biological fact you can find in our DNA. It's a story. But it's an incredibly powerful story that millions of people believe in, and it's the foundation for entire nations and legal systems.
So here's another thing you can try. Next time you're near a bank, or even just watch a courtroom scene on TV, look closer. What you are seeing is an imagined order in action. Ask yourself, what are the stories, the symbols, the rituals that make all of this work? How do we all agree to trust the system? Okay, this brings us to our final section, and this is where the story of Sapiens gets truly mind-bending. Because after spending millennia mastering the world around us with our stories, we are now starting to turn those same powerful tools inward, on ourselves.
For 4 billion years, life on this planet evolved by one set of rules: natural selection. But now, for the first time ever, that's changing. Through bioengineering, artificial intelligence, cyborg technologies, we're beginning to replace the blind forces of evolution with our own intelligent design. We are literally becoming the authors of life itself.
And this leaves us with what is, without a doubt, the most important question humanity has ever faced. We started this journey telling stories about spirits in the trees. We are now on the verge of writing new stories directly into our genes. So, what kind of story should we write? What do we want? To want.
So, let's end with one last challenge to really think about this. If you could redesign humanity and amplify one single value, maybe it's compassion, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's happiness, what would you choose? Pick one. And then, just for this week, try to let that value consciously guide one small ethical choice you make, and just see what happens. It's a tiny experiment in designing the future, one choice at a time.